It's my pleasure now to invite our guest of honor, Prime Minister Lee, to address us. I would also like to invite Mr. Piyush Gupta, Chairman of IIM Pact Global Advisory Council, an alum of IIM Ahmedabad and CEO of DBS Group. Piyush will help to moderate a Q&A session with the Prime Minister after his address. You can send in questions for the Prime Minister via Pigeonhole, and we will have a slide for how you access Pigeonhole in a minute. Thank you.
Put all this somewhere. Okay.
Prime Minister, thank you for being here. Let me echo Sanjeev's thanks on behalf of the entire IIM alumni community to you for gracing this occasion. You know, Sanjeev talked about over 1,000 IIM alumni in this city. It's quite instructive that from my own cohort of 1982, 5% of us live in Singapore. That includes the president of your stock exchange, the CEO of Standard Chartered Bank, the head of OLAM, and I happen to run DBS. So it's quite a August gathering. PM, perhaps it would be helpful if we could kick off by giving you an opportunity to just say a few words to the gathering, including perhaps why you chose to accept this invitation.
I could not refuse. Well, welcome to all the IIM alumni here, the many who are based in Singapore, and all those who have come to join us for this IIM Pact. We are very honored to have attracted so many of you to come. We hope that you have found it a good experience living, working here, and as well as participating in this conference. There are so many of you here that really, I think there's a good case to be made to the IIM management to set up a branch in Singapore.
All right.
Your theme is change, and this is a period of great change in the world. You see it all over the region. In Singapore, if you've been following our newspapers, you'll know that we are at a turning point and finding a new way forward because we've reached a certain level of development and of social maturity, and we have to find a different path in order to keep on improving our people's lives and upgrading our society. In the region, there are also great changes taking place. People talk about China, the angst over whether it's going to be 7% growth, maybe 6.5%, and what happens if you cross a magic number. But whether it's 6.5% or 7% growth, China is undergoing very rapid change, economic as well as social change, and is impacting the region in profound ways. The power balance is shifting, the economic influence is increasing, the way regional interdependencies and cooperation is developing. So many countries in the region, in fact in the world, now have China as their biggest trading partner, including Singapore since about 3 years ago. And I think even for India, China is either your second or your first biggest trading partner. So that's a very big fact in the world which we are adjusting to and which we are cautiously optimistic will be a positive change in the global scene. Within Southeast Asia, you're seeing governments change. There's a new government elected, new president elected in Indonesia. President Jokowi, or President-elect Jokowi, came in. Numerically, it was a few percentage points of a majority, but I think with a strong psychological mandate from his people to take the country another step forward, building on what President Yudhoyono has done over the last 10 years. And we are happy that all the challenges and the electoral processes are now practically completed, and we look forward to working with him. Indonesia is our biggest neighbor, and we depend on and enormously value a constructive relationship where we can prosper together. With India, you have a new prime minister. I think he came in with a thumping mandate. He has a majority in the Lok Sabha, which is something which has not happened for a very, very long time. And I think it makes a difference when you have a majority with one party as opposed to a majority with 11 coalition partners. And when you have, as at some stages happen, when you have more than one communist party in that coalition, life becomes very complicated. So there are great hopes for India to take the next step forward, and India is a massive country, so you do not expect transformation within 100 days. But we do hope that it will be going in a positive, upward, and accelerated direction. Connecting to the world, fulfilling its potential, attracting investments, engaging with a global trading system, and playing your role also strategically in the wider region. India has made a lot of progress since first, in the early 90s, Manmohan Singh was a finance minister, and Narasimha Rao, as a semi-retired person, became prime minister, and to everybody's surprise, totally transformed the game. But in the last 10 years, I think the pace of the transformation has moderated, and we hope that the new government certainly is very determined to make a fresh start, will be able to do so. Between Singapore and India, we have a very good base to work upon. We have a CECA, a closer economic cooperation agreement, which was in fact the first bilateral such agreement which India had signed with any country in the world. And we hope that on that basis, we can move forward. Our ministers have been visiting India. Your ministers have been visiting Singapore. In fact, I met Mamata Banerjee a couple of days ago. I met Sushma Swaraj, a foreign minister, last week. And I'm here today. And I'm looking forward to meeting your prime ministers before the year's out, because we'll be attending various things together. And your prime minister has already received Shanmugam, our foreign minister, and talked about, in a very focused way, about how we can take our relationship forward. Talking about urban development, talking about water and sewage projects, because that's one of his passions. Talking about port developments, because that's one of our strengths. Talking about education and training, because that's one of the areas where you need to move forward. And we would like to develop these areas as well. And we are hopeful that we will be able to do so. And I think it will be beneficial to both countries. So it's a time of change, and we have to get used to it. To say that "I'm the change" is the slogan, is not a bad slogan. After all, President Obama got elected on the message of change you can believe in. The challenge is to change the slogan into reality.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the PM a couple of questions. As you've been told before, you're welcome to post questions on Pigeonhole. You have these little cards on your table which tell you where to visit. I think it's http://phlive.at. So please post questions, and I'll try and moderate those questions as well. Prime Minister, let me start with the question around Singapore, India. The good news is there's a good base. As you said, if I figure the trade patterns, Singapore is India's 7th largest trade partner. India exports about 12 billion bucks. There's 6,000 Indian companies registered here. India is Singapore's 11th largest trade partner, 6 billion in exports, and a lot of Singapore investment going in. So telco, port, now airlines with Singapore Airlines, banks,
Yes,
we are there
yes.
as well. That notwithstanding, it seems to me that if you're brutally honest, China occupies a very different position in the psyche of Singapore and Singaporeans. And I'm not sure whether it's because of the ethnic makeup of our country or the G2G comfort in the past, or just because China is bigger in size. And therefore, there's a lot more happening with China. Or could it just be, which is what I find, that Singapore finds, or Singapore, particularly Singapore business, finds it difficult to navigate India. What's your sense of this? And is there a way we can elevate the Singapore-India equation to much like the Singapore-China equation?
The potential is always there. You say China is bigger, in a way that's true. The GDP is 3 times bigger than India's. The trade is maybe 5 times bigger than India's, global trade. And our trade with China and our investments in China are much, much bigger than our investments or trade with India. But in another way, in terms of head count, you have as many Indians as there are Chinese in the world. So why is the potential not fully developed? Well, it's partly the history of the way the reforms have been carried out in China, and they took off, I think, starting earlier than you. But it's also because India has a more complicated society and more complicated political situation, and things take longer to happen. We would like to develop much more in India. I remember vividly one Indian businessman telling me everything is quite transparent in India, you just need to know where to go. So I think that there are many individual opportunities. Individual businessmen go, they do well, they invest in hotels, they do projects, they trade. I think there are some infrastructure projects now in India, Hyflux is there. But in a strategic sense, there is not that same clear focus on development, on being outwardly oriented, on wanting to draw in maximum all of the sources which can help you to prosper. The Chinese, for example, I think have been very systematic in making use of their diaspora. In the way they cultivate the diaspora, in the way they bring the diaspora in to their activities. For example, when they celebrated their 60th anniversary and had a big parade in Beijing, they invited people from all over the world to come and participate who were community leaders in their own societies. And the diaspora has made a big difference to them, bringing back capital, providing them a network. India has a tremendous NRI diaspora, but I think that you can do more with them. And you really also want to have that confidence to open up and link up with the world. And sometimes it's difficult, sometimes you have other social considerations. But if you want to move faster, if you want to fulfill that potential, you have to do that. I think the WTO is one area which has been a troubled issue, and successive Indian governments have taken a very, if I put it diplomatically, a very cautious and conservative view of what it is wise for India to open up to. But in fact, it's difficult to open up. But if there is an international deal, that's one way to help overcome the domestic political difficulties and justify changes which in the long term are beneficial and which India will profit from enormously. But it has not been, and I think we're waiting to see how this new government will take it. There was some leftover business from the previous government with a WTO agreement, which was reached in Bali last year in December. And the new government decided it needed to reopen that issue, and unfortunately, therefore, the deal unraveled, which I think is a pity for everybody.
Prime Minister, just sticking to that theme, one of the, when Foreign Minister Hsien was in India, there's talk about the Prime Minister in India wanting to do these 100 smart cities,
Yes.
and the notion that maybe Singapore could play a role.
Yes.
Do you think a partnership like Suzhou or Tianjin or maybe Chongqing or whatever the third one we're considering, you think that's a possibility between Singapore and India?
It's a possibility. It's one which we have been discussing with India for a long time. It has not happened yet. I think that there are different issues involved. We have such a project under discussion in Tamil Nadu for at least 10 years. We still hope at some point it will happen.
I think the Chief Minister of Telangana might have a view on Hyderabad in the future.
But I should say, apropos Hyderabad, under the preceding management, we do have significant projects there.
That is true.
And also in Bangalore. So although we don't have a project like Suzhou or Tianjin, we have significant investments. We have IT parks in Bangalore. We have a park in Hyderabad. We have projects elsewhere, and they are substantial investments.